Mystery Phantom.
I used to think small towns were honest. Not good, not safe, just honest, like the land itself. Out in the West, nothing pretends to be what it isn't. The sun hits hard, the wind tells you when it's coming, and if a place is dying, you can see it in the paint peeling off the diner sign and the way the gas station lights flicker, even at noon. That's what I told myself when I turned off the highway and followed the narrow two-lane road toward a place called Juniper Hollow. I wasn't looking for a ghost story. I wasn't hunting a curse. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was chasing a sound, a recording I'd found in a box of secondhand tapes at a swap meet outside Flagstaff. $10 for a cardboard crate, mostly old country songs and blank cassettes labeled things like 92 Vacation and Kids Xmas. At the bottom, under a cracked plastic case, there was one tape with a clean white label. No date. Just 2 words written in block letters like they'd been pressed into the paper with anger. Dry River. Curiosity is a simple engine. It doesn't need much fuel. I popped the tape into my old player right there in the parking lot, expecting music or static or somebody's weird home experiments. Instead, I heard a man breathing, close to the mic, slow, like he was trying not to be heard. Then his voice, low and tight. "If you're listening, don't come here." A pause. Wind. Something rattling, maybe a chain link fence. And then, even quieter. "If you already came, don't follow the river. Don't follow the river. Don't." The tape cut to a shriek of static, the kind that makes your teeth ache. And behind it, behind the static, like something trapped under ice, there was a pattern, a faint rhythm, not words exactly, more like someone dragging something along stone. I played it again and again. Each time I noticed something new, a faraway bell maybe, or a hollow knocking, the sense that the man wasn't alone. When I got home, I tried searching Juniper Hollow, Dry River online. Nothing useful. A few old maps, one mention of a seasonal creek, a blurred newspaper scan about a flash flood in the late 70s. But when I searched the exact phrase, "Don't follow the river," one line popped up in a forgotten forum thread from years ago. A user posted, "Anyone from northern Arizona remember the town that won't let you film the riverbed?" No location, no details, just comments arguing, joking, calling it fake. Still, I couldn't shake that breathing on the tape. How close it sounded, like the man had pressed his mouth right against the microphone to keep the sound from carrying. So I packed like a person pretending he wasn't scared. Not camping gear, not a shotgun, nothing dramatic. Just a small bag, my phone, a flashlight, extra batteries, a handheld recorder, and a camera I barely knew how to use, and that tape in my pocket like a dare. The farther west I drove, the more the world emptied out. The radio lost stations, my phone lost bars. The sky got big and pale, like it had been bleached. By late afternoon, the road narrowed. The land flattened into a scrubby basin. Dust devils spun lazily across open stretches. Then I saw the sign, Juniper Hollow, population 612. Someone had shot the sign, the bullet holes clustered around the 6, as if the number had offended them. The town itself looked like it had been built from leftovers. A few sun-faded houses, a small school, a post office with a flag that hung limp even in the breeze. And right through the middle, like a cut that never healed, a wide, dry riverbed filled with pale stones and driftwood that looked too old to still exist. I found a motel with 3 working rooms and a neon vacancy sign that buzzed like an insect. The owner didn't smile when I checked in. He didn't ask my name. He looked at my camera case like it was a weapon. "You passin' through?" he asked. "Just for a night," I lied. He nodded once, like he'd heard that lie 1,000 times. "Don't go down to the river after dark," he said, and then added, almost as if he couldn't stop himself, "and if you hear water, you didn't." I laughed a little, like a person trying to keep the air light. "Hear water?" His eyes flicked to my mouth, not in confusion, in warning. "There isn't any," he said. "That's the point." He slid the key across the counter. His hand trembled just slightly, like he'd had too much coffee or too little sleep. In my room, I set my things down and tried to convince myself I was chasing history, an abandoned local myth, a prank tape, anything normal. But when evening fell, the town changed. The streetlights came on too early, throwing weak orange circles onto empty sidewalks. Curtains closed in windows, one after another, like the whole place was blinking itself shut. And the riverbed sat there in the middle of everything, wide and quiet, as if it was listening. I decided to go to the diner before it closed. It was called Mara's, a squat building with dusty windows and a bell on the door that rang like a tiny alarm when I walked in. 3 people looked up at me at once. Kitchen sound softened like someone had turned down a volume knob. The waitress leaned closer. Her voice dropped. "The river used to run," she said, "before the ground cracked, before the springs went bitter, before the town started listening." Listening to what? She hesitated. Then, in the space between one breath and the next, I heard something outside. Not loud, not clear, just a faint, wet sound, like someone pouring water slowly onto stone. The man beside me stiffened so hard his stool squeaked. The waitress's face drained. "That's not," I started, because I could still be logical for another half second. Then the sound stopped, and everyone exhaled at once, like they'd been holding their breath together.
The waitress set my plate down with shaking hands. She said, "Finish and go, and keep your room lights on." I paid quickly, pretending I wasn't rattled. When I stepped outside, the air had cooled. The sky was deepening to purple. The riverbed was visible from the diner parking lot. In the fading light, the stones looked almost white. And for just a second, just one blink, I thought I saw something down there that wasn't a stone. A shape, standing still, too tall, too thin. But when I stared, it was gone, swallowed by the shadows between the scattered driftwood. I walked back to the motel without looking at the river again. In my room, I locked the door. I placed the cassette on the table and stared at it like it might move. Then,
Because I'm an idiot and curiosity is a simple engine, I put the tape in the player. I pressed play. The breathing started, close, slow, and underneath it, faint as a memory, the sound of something scraping along stone, steady, patient, moving closer. I stopped the tape. The room went silent. Then, outside, somewhere near the center of town, the dry riverbed made a noise. Not water, not wind, a soft, deliberate click, 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 like stones being tapped together in a pattern. I sat very still, and somewhere in the darkness, Juniper Hollow tapped back. That night, I slept in pieces. Not the kind of sleep where you dream and wake refreshed, but the kind where you blink and time has moved without you. I kept waking up to the same thought. If you hear water, you didn't. At 1:13 a.m., I woke to the faintest sound, so small I could have imagined it. A drip. I sat up, listening. Another drip. Then another.
My first instinct was plumbing. Old motel, leaky pipes, simple. But the sound wasn't coming from the bathroom. It was coming from outside, from the direction of the riverbed. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain back a fraction. The town was dead still. Streetlights made pale pools on the road. No cars, no movement. Then I saw it. Down in the riverbed, between stones, something gleamed. A thin line of light, like moonlight on wet rock. But there was no water. There couldn't be. The line moved, not flowing, sliding, like something wet being pulled across dry stone. My heart started doing that stupid fast thing. I stepped back from the window and forced myself to breathe. I told myself, it's just reflection, a trick of light. Then I heard it again, closer now, a soft scraping, like a broom on concrete, like a body being dragged. I grabbed my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam hit the curtain, bright and safe and normal. I waited, half expecting someone to knock on my door or laugh outside, proving it was a prank. Nothing. The scraping faded. I stood there until my legs got tired and my thoughts started to spiral. Then I sat on the bed and did the only thing that felt remotely in control. I turned on my recorder. I whispered the date and time. I described what I heard. I described the light in the riverbed. I tried to keep my voice steady. And when I finished, I listened back. My voice was there, but behind it, beneath the thin layer of motel silence, was something else.
A second sound, so faint I almost missed it. Tapping. Not random, a pattern. 3 taps, pause. 2 taps, pause. 3 taps. Like a code, like a knock answered by another knock far away. I played the tape I'd found again, and my stomach dropped. Under the static, near the end, the scraping sound was paired with the exact same tapping pattern. 3, pause, 2, pause, 3. Juniper Hollow wasn't just quiet, it was communicating. Morning arrived like a relief. Sunlight made the town look less haunted, just poor, worn, tired. I went to the diner early. Mara, if that was really her name, served me coffee without the usual suspicion. "You slept?" she asked. "Sort of," I said. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. "You heard it," she said, not a question. I didn't answer. My face probably did. She refilled my coffee and leaned in. "There's a reason we don't walk the river," she said. "The river walks us." I tried to laugh again. It came out thin. "What does that mean?" She glanced at the other customers, 2 men in work shirts, a teenage girl with headphones, an older woman reading the same page of a newspaper over and over, like her eyes weren't really seeing it. "People go down there," she said, "and they come back wrong." "Wrong how?" Mara's hand tightened on the coffee pot. "They start listening," she said. "They start answering." I swallowed. Answering what? She straightened, like she'd already said too much. "You should leave," she said. "That tape you got, throw it in the trash outside town. Don't keep it in your car." My skin prickled. "How do you know about the tape?"
She stared at me. Then, quietly, she said, "Because we've seen your kind before." I paid and walked out into daylight that suddenly felt staged, like a set built to hide what happens at night. I decided to explore, carefully, not the riverbed, not yet. First, the town records. Juniper Hollow had a small library that doubled as a community center. 1 room, 2 computers, a bulletin board filled with faded notices, missing dog, church potluck, do not dump trash in the wash. The librarian, a thin man with glasses that magnified his eyes, watched me like a bug under a microscope. "I'm looking for old articles," I said. "Anything about the river?" His mouth tightened. "Why?" "I'm writing," I lied. "Travel piece." He didn't believe me, but he gestured toward a dusty cabinet of local newspapers. I spent hours flipping brittle pages. The town's life was simple on paper. Graduations, baseball games, elections nobody outside cared about. Then I found it. A headline from 1978. "Flash flood kills 11. Juniper Hollow mourns." The article talked about sudden rain in the hills, water roaring through the riverbed at night, sweeping away cars, tearing through homes near the wash. It named the dead, families, kids, and at the bottom, a sentence that didn't fit the rest. Witnesses reported hearing a bell from the river moments before the water arrived. I stared at that line until my eyes ached. A bell, like the bell I'd heard faintly on the cassette. I dug deeper. Another article, a year later. Town council bans river access after dark. Official reason, safety, loose ground, falling debris, trespassing. Unofficial reason, not printed, but scribbled in pencil in the margin by some unknown hand, shaky and urgent. It calls them back. My throat tightened. I copied what I could, photos of headlines, notes on my phone. The librarian watched me the entire time, expression flat. When I finally left, he spoke without looking up. "You can't fix what's in the stones," he said. "What?" I asked. He lifted his eyes to mine. "You can't fix what listens." The sun was dropping by the time I returned to the motel. I told myself I would leave at dawn. I told myself I'd done enough. I had the articles, the notes, the evidence that the tape wasn't random. But there's a point in every bad decision where leaving feels like surrender. And my brain, brilliant and stupid, decided it needed one more piece. I needed to see the riverbed up close.
Not at night, not after dark, just before. That way, I told myself I could prove it wasn't supernatural. Prove it was just fear layered over tragedy. Around 5:30 p.m., the shadows lengthened. The air cooled fast like the day's heat had been switched off. I walked to the edge of the dry riverbed. Up close, it smelled wrong. Not rotten, not sewage, just metallic, like pennies on your tongue. The stones were smooth and pale. Driftwood lay in tangles, sun-bleached and cracked. And there were marks, lines scratched into stone, not natural erosion, not tire tracks. Thin, deliberate grooves, like someone had dragged a nail across rock again and again. I crouched and ran my fingers near one. The groove was deep enough to catch the tip of my nail. My skin crawled. Then I noticed something else. Little piles of stones stacked carefully in small towers along the riverbed floor. Cairns, dozens of them, some fresh, some collapsed. And between them, scattered like offerings, old coins, rusted keys, a child's plastic bracelet, a cracked watch face. Things people carry, things people lose, things people leave when they're convinced something will keep them safe. I stood up, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. Not just absence of sound, a pressure, like the town itself was holding its breath. Then, one single soft note. A bell. Not loud, not close. Far away, downriver, hidden among the stones. The sound was pure and clear, like the first ring of a church bell on a cold morning. I froze. The sun dipped lower. The bell rang again. And somewhere beneath my feet, deep in the river stones, something answered with that tapping pattern. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I backed away, fast, careful not to run, because running feels like panic, and panic feels like blood in the water, except this place didn't have water. It had attention. I got back to my room and locked the door. The sun went down. The neon sign buzzed. And from outside, drifting through the thin motel walls, I heard it. The slow, wet sound of water that wasn't there. I'm going to say something that makes me sound weak, but it's true. By the 3rd night sound, I was already bargaining with myself. If it gets worse, I'll leave. If I hear it again, I'll leave. If I see anything, I'll leave. But the problem with Juniper Hollow is that it doesn't give you big, obvious signs. It gives you small ones, like pins. Little pricks that sink deeper the longer you stay, until you can't tell what hurts and what's just you. That night, I sat in the motel chair facing the window, fully dressed, flashlight in my lap like it was a comfort object.
I told myself I was staying awake on purpose. I told myself I was in control. At 10:47 p.m., the tapping started again. Not outside, inside, from the wall. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3. I held my breath and listened. It came again, same rhythm. Then, after a pause that felt like the room leaning toward me, another set of taps answered, fainter, farther, like a reply down a hallway. For the first time, the pattern changed. 3, pause, 2, pause, 3. Then, 1 tap. Just 1. Like a question. My mouth went dry, my hand tightened around the flashlight, and I did the thing Mara had warned me about. Without thinking, without planning, like my body moved before my brain could stop it, I tapped back. 1 tap, on the bedside table. The room went silent so fast it felt like the air had been vacuumed out. Then the wall tapped again, right where the first sound had come from. 3, pause, 2, pause, 3. 1 tap. I sat there, frozen, listening to my own heartbeat. Then, underneath everything, so low it could have been imagination, I heard a voice, not from the tape, not from the diner, not from outside, from inside the motel itself. A whisper like breath against glass. River. I stood up so fast the chair scraped. The whisper came again, closer now, threaded through the air like smoke. River. I clicked the flashlight on and swung it toward the door, the window, the bathroom, like light could catch whispers. Nothing. But the tapping continued, steady, patient, like a finger on stone. 3, pause, 2, pause, 3, 1 tap. I sat there, frozen, listening to my own heartbeat. Then, as my hand shook, I lifted my recorder and hit record.
I whispered the time. I whispered what was happening. My voice sounded thin and far away, like it belonged to someone else. Then the whisper came again, clearer. Follow. My skin turned cold, and the sound of water, impossible, wet, close, slid under the door like a smell. I stepped back from it. The bottom of the door was dry, no puddle, no leak, but I could hear it. A slow trickle, like a stream running over stones. My rational brain tried to take over. This is hysteria, it said. You're tired. You're in a new place. Your mind is pattern matching. But my body didn't care about rational. My body cared about survival. I backed away from the door until my shoulders hit the wall, and that's when I noticed the mirror above the dresser. I hadn't looked in it all day. I'd avoided it without knowing why. Now, in the flashlight beam, my reflection looked wrong. Not monstrous, not movie scary, just delayed. I moved my head slightly. My reflection moved a fraction of a second later, like it had to decide. I blinked. My reflection blinked slower. The whisper came again.
Answer. And the reflection, my own face, lifted its hand before I did. It raised one finger and tapped the glass from the inside. One tap. I stumbled back, breath choking in my throat. The mirror showed me standing there, flashlight shaking, eyes wide. But the reflection's mouth moved without sound, shaping words I couldn't hear. Then the tapping on the wall stopped, and the room filled with a new sound. A bell ringing once, far away. A signal, an invitation. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the bed until dawn, lights on, recorder running, waiting for something to break the thin boundary between strange and impossible. Morning came, and I told myself I was leaving. I packed my bag. I shoved the tape into my pocket. I walked toward my car, and then I saw it on my windshield. A wet handprint, perfectly outlined, fingers long, palm pressed hard. Except the glass was dry. The print looked wet, but when I touched it, my fingers came away clean. Still, the shape remained, as if the moisture was on the inside of the glass.
I stared at it, heart pounding. Then the motel owner stepped out of his office, saw me staring, and his face hardened. "You answered," he said. I didn't speak. His jaw clenched. "Why would you do that?" My voice failed. "I don't know." He looked past me, toward the riverbed, like he expected it to be watching. Maybe it was. "Once you answer," he said, "it knows you can hear." He stepped closer, voice low. "It doesn't need water," he said. "It just needs a path." Then he pointed at the tape in my hand, because somehow he knew I still had it. "That thing you brought," he said, "isn't a warning." He swallowed. "It's an address." I left Juniper Hollow at 7:10 a.m. I remember the time because I said it out loud into the recorder, like speaking facts could pin the world back into place. My voice sounded rough, scraped by sleepless nights. The sun was up, but it felt borrowed, weak, like someone handed it to the sky for show. The tape was still in my pocket. I told myself I wouldn't touch the river, that I wouldn't even look at it. Then I heard the bell again. It rang once, lonely, somewhere far down the dry riverbed, not echoing like a normal bell should, more like a single note suspended in air, unbothered by distance or physics. I stopped. The street was empty. The town was awake, but barely. People moved inside houses, behind blinds, avoiding windows, avoiding the wash, avoiding me, because they knew. I crossed the road toward the library. It wasn't open yet, but the bulletin board outside was, and on it, pinned crooked, fresh, printed on clean paper that didn't match the rest of the town's sun-bleached history, was a new notice. River Survey Team, meet at the wash, 8 p.m. No signatures, no names, just that. The notice fluttered when I stepped close, even though there was no wind. I tore it down and crumpled it before I could think. It felt like defiance. It felt good for half a second. Then I saw more of them. Notices all around town.
on poles, boards, doors, taped to the side of the post office, slipped under wipers of parked cars. 8 p.m. Wash, survey, river. Not warnings, instructions. I backed away from the library. My phone had 0 bars now, not even a ghost of signal. The dashboard still glowed amber, frozen on the last station it ever caught. The sky overhead looked flat, painted, cloudless, too clean. I drove to the edge of town and parked where the asphalt frayed into gravel. The desert waited beyond it, big, quiet, honest, I hoped. I pulled the tape out and stared at it. I should have thrown it away, like the waitress said, but now I knew better. You don't throw away an address, you burn it. I set the tape on a stone, doused it with thermos coffee because I had nothing smarter, and lit it with a match I found in the glove box. The plastic curled and blackened fast, the label burned last, dry river shriveling like a name you forget on purpose. The fire went out quick, too quick. The tape was ash, the stone beneath it was cold, and in the ash, untouched by flame, were 3 tiny stones arranged in a pattern. My stomach dropped. It wasn't coincidence, it was the same tapping code. I whispered into the recorder, 3, 2, 3. It's not random, it's not history, it's... I stopped because saying it would make it real, but it was already real. I got back into the car and drove north out of town. Not west, not south. North felt safer, less poetic, less cursed direction. But safety is a trick in places like this. At 9:02 a.m., the road crossed the riverbed again. A bridge, short, cracked, no water beneath, just stones, driftwood, and white dust.
And down there, in the center of the wash, was a fresh cairn I hadn't seen before. Tall, neat, built that morning. On top of it, balanced impossibly, was a motel key identical to mine. Room 3, the one I slept in. My pulse hammered in my ears, because if the river had a survey team, it started surveying me first. I drove for hours after the bridge, but time felt slippery. The dash clock moved, but my sense of it didn't. By 11:18 a.m., I hit a stretch of desert that had no landmarks, no cars, no clouds, just ground and sky agreeing to erase distance. I pulled over beside a rust-eaten mile marker and played the recorder. The playback was clean until the last minute of segment 4, where a faint second track hid beneath my voice. Not a whisper this time, a hum, low and constant, like vibration through a long pipe. Then the tapping came, layered under the hum. 3 taps, pause. 2 taps, pause. 3 taps. I shut it off. I couldn't convince myself it was glitching anymore. I'd heard static, whispers, bells, codes. Now a hum under silence itself. I reached the next gas station at 12:09 p.m. It wasn't on any map I owned, one of those desert stations that exists only because someone once needed fuel exactly there. The lights buzzed white, no colors, no branding, just a single pump working, dust crusted around its base. A handwritten board by the register said, "Cash only." Of course. The attendant was a middle-aged guy who didn't ask questions. People out here learn not to. I paid, took my receipt, and noticed the name printed at the top wasn't a station name. It was a town name. Brackenridge. Not Juniper Hollow. A different town, northwest of nowhere. I asked him, trying to sound normal, "You know Brackenridge?" He paused, not dramatic, just long enough for the desert to lean in. "Everyone knows Brackenridge," he said. "Nobody talks about it." I nodded once and left. The desert swallowed the station in my rear-view mirror before I'd shifted back to 40 mph.
I reached Brackenridge. Population sign missing. Literally missing. The metal posts still stood, bolts exposed like teeth pulled from gums. The town felt smaller than Juniper Hollow, but less timid. Houses here stared back. Not people. Structures. Windows unbroken. Doors shut hard. No kids' bikes outside. No wind chimes. No stray dogs. Just lines. White chalk-like lines drawn on the road edges, the sidewalk cracks, the door frames. Thin. Obsessive. Not random, purposeful, like someone tried to map paths for something blind that learned by touch. I walked the town for 8 minutes, recorder in hand, pretending I was collecting ambiance. But there was no ambiance to collect. No birds, no wind, no voices, no dogs. No distant cars. A town without small sounds is a town without witnesses. And a dry river that hums doesn't need witnesses. It just needs someone who answered once. Me. Night returned at 5:56 p.m., sudden and unceremonious, like the desert dropped a curtain. I stayed in Brackenridge because leaving felt like signing a contract I didn't read. Curiosity, sure, but part of me wanted to know the rules of the thing hunting me, even if it meant getting cornered. I found another motel. No neon this time, no sign at all. Just a single 3 stamped on the door in fading brass. Inside, the room was cleaner than it should have been. Bed made tight, mirror polished, sink dry, bone dry, the kind of dry that feels intentional. At 8 p.m., nothing happened. No bell, no hum, no tapping, no impossible reflections, no whispers slithering under doors. Just a drip that never came. Silence can be louder than noise when you're waiting for something to announce itself. I sat on the bed and checked the recorder again. I played the tape, low volume. Static. But not violent static, not a glitch scream. Soft static, calm, almost mechanical. Then, for the first time, I heard something like a voice, but not fully formed. No details, no dramatic lines, just a faint presence, like a warning you feel, not see. I clicked off playback.
The mirror behind me reflected orange streetlight leaking through curtains. My reflection moved normally now. No delay, no decisions. But the handprint on my windshield earlier still burned in my mind like evidence I couldn't hand to anyone. I opened my notebook and wrote one line at 8:16 p.m. It doesn't break the rules. It waits for you to. I didn't know I said it out loud until the recorder's red light blinked back at me, already rolling. Because at 8:17 p.m., the tapping began again. Not fast, not aggressive, confident. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. Then the pattern stretched longer, like a sentence punctuated in stone. 3 taps, 2 taps, 3 taps, 1 tap, 2 taps, 1 tap. A code evolving. I didn't answer this time. I stood up, bag in hand, recorder still running, and left the room. Outside, the desert wind finally spoke, soft but real. My car windshield was clean now. No prints, no codes, no offers. But the dry riverbed, invisible in darkness beyond town limits, hummed faintly, like a memory refusing to die.
Midnight didn't knock this time. It sat on the town like weight. I waited until 9:40 p.m. before moving. The library had closed hours ago, but one side door never fully latched. That's where I slipped in, quiet as dust settling. Inside, I found the county survey maps archived in drawers older than the town's name. Most were boring grids, elevation marks, irrigation plans for rivers that still ran. But one map was different. The Dry River Basin Survey, 1989. Someone had drawn over the printed lines in chalk, turning the neat cartography into a nervous maze. Arrows pointed inward toward the center of the wash. Notes circled one zone repeatedly. Null flow point. In simple terms, the place where water used to start, but no longer did. I folded the map and walked out. At 9:58 p.m., I stepped onto the dry riverbed. The stones were cold again, like they never remembered the sun. My flashlight beam hit them and scattered pale dust motes upward, like tiny ghosts fleeing a funeral. Then I saw the lines again. The chalk lines from town had continued here, not stopping at the edge like borders should. They ran down into the wash, splitting around driftwood, circling cairns, bending like veins toward the center. The lines lead both ways. Warnings don't. Paths do. I followed them. Not fast, not hero slow, just steady, investigative slow. At 10:03 p.m., the hum began again, not from the recorder this time, from the ground. Subtle, no shaking, no horror soundtrack drama. A vibration through stones, faint but alive. At 10:11 p.m., I reached the null flow point, a flat clearing of stones surrounded by half-collapsed cairns. Coins lay scattered, keys, bracelets, a rusted sheriff's badge face down, edges softened by sand. I crouched and placed my hand on the stones, and the tapping answered, not from walls, not from wind, from under my palm. 3 taps,
pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. The old code, the one I refused to answer earlier. Then a new sound layered under it. No details, no gore, no screaming, just the unmistakable wrongness. A drip. One single drip, dark and slow, falling onto stone that was dry. I pulled my hand back. Another drip landed exactly where my palm had been. Then another. Not water, not rain, no puddles forming. Just the idea of a drop following a path I'd accidentally drawn by answering once. I backed away from the clearing, breath thin in cold air. Because the thing in the stones didn't want blood. It wanted a response. And responses are doors you can't unopen.
I didn't run from the null flow point. Running would have meant panic. Panic is loud. Panic is an answer. Instead, I stepped backwards, slow and deliberate, keeping my flashlight low so the beam didn't stab the dark too hard. The drip stopped the moment I broke contact with the clearing. That's when I understood something important. It wasn't chasing me. It was waiting for me to choose. Back in my room, I spread everything out on the bed. Maps, notes, photos, recorder. I lined them up like evidence at a trial where the judge had already decided the verdict. And then the rules started making sense. Not written anywhere, not spoken aloud, implied, like gravity. Rule 1, it doesn't move first. The river doesn't run unless something enters it. The sound doesn't start unless it's heard. The code doesn't change unless it's answered. Rule 2, it remembers paths, lines on stone, chalk on concrete, grooves in memory. Once something passes through a place, that place stays open. Rule 3, it replaces what leaves. People don't disappear, they are substituted. That last rule hit me hard enough that I had to sit down. Because I finally understood Breckenridge. Why it felt watched but not afraid. Why Juniper Hollow closed its curtains before dark. Why nobody reported missing people anymore. They weren't missing. They were still there. Just quiet. At 11:32 p.m., the recorder clicked on by itself. I didn't touch it. The red light blinked once, steady. And from the playback speaker, soft, close, unmistakably human, I heard my own voice. Not from tonight, from earlier, from when I first played the tape in the motel days ago. If you're listening, don't come here. My stomach turned. The sound quality was wrong, too clean, too near. Then the voice continued, saying something I didn't remember recording. If you answered once, it's already learned you. I stood up slowly. The mirror across the room reflected me standing there, but behind my reflection, just behind my shoulder, there were lines on the wall I hadn't drawn. Thin, chalk white, branching, mapping. I didn't turn around, because reflections don't lie unless they've already been replaced. The tapping came one last time that night. Not a question, a conclusion. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps,
Pause. 3 taps. Then silence. Not waiting silence. Just finished silence. I slept for exactly 2 hours. No dreams. Just absence.
I woke up at 4:41 a.m. without an alarm. No sound woke me. No dream spilled me into consciousness. My eyes just opened, like something had finished counting. The room felt lighter, not safe, just emptied. The chalk lines on the wall were gone. The recorder was off. The maps lay exactly where I had left them. But I knew, without evidence, without reason, that staying until sunrise would be a mistake. Some rules only work once. I packed fast. No notes, no photos, no proof. I left the map behind on purpose. You don't take directions out of a place like this. Outside, Bracken Ridge was colorless, pre-dawn gray. No birds, no wind. I walked to my car and stopped. Because the dry riverbed had moved. Not physically, not geographically, relationally. Where the road used to run straight north, the wash now crossed it, wide, pale, unavoidable. No bridge, no detour, just stones laid across asphalt, like the town had quietly rearranged itself while I slept. I stood there a long time, heart pounding slow and heavy. Then I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Fine," I said out loud, once more, because I understood the last rule now. You can cross it, but you can't take a path with you. I stepped into the wash for the final time. No bell rang, no tapping answered. The stones were cold but inert, like teeth after a mouth has closed. I walked straight across, no flashlight, no recorder, no sound. Halfway through, I felt it, not grabbing, not chasing, just matching my pace, like a shadow learning how to stand upright. I didn't look down, I didn't speak, I didn't answer anything. When my boots hit asphalt on the far side, the pressure lifted, the hum faded, the earth exhaled. I drove until the sun came up, then farther still. I didn't stop until my phone regained signal and my radio filled with noise that meant nothing. Weeks passed. Nothing followed. No whispers, no bells, no taps. I convinced myself it was over. Then one night, months later, in a city apartment with pipes ticking and sirens in the distance, I heard it. Not loud, not close, just a familiar pattern under the building's normal sounds. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps, coming from somewhere beneath the walls. I didn't answer. I never will, because the dry river doesn't need to follow you. Once you've crossed it, it knows how to wait where you are.
I didn't plan to record this. That's the first thing you should know. I told myself the story was finished when I stopped answering, when I stopped documenting, when I let time bury Juniper Hollow and Bracken Ridge under newer memories, jobs, faces, normal noise. But stories like this don't end. They settle. I'm recording this months later from a place with running water, working street lights, and neighbors who argue about parking spaces instead of listening for bells. On paper, everything is normal. That's how it survives. I threw away the notebook weeks ago, burned the last photocopy of the survey map. I even smashed the old handheld recorder with a hammer, took the pieces to different trash bins across the city. None of it mattered, because the record doesn't live in objects, it lives in patterns. I started noticing small things first. Chalk lines near construction sites that didn't match any utility marking. Little stacks of stones at the edge of sidewalks where no one ever sat. Keys left on low walls, always paired with coins. I told myself it was coincidence. Cities are full of coincidences. Then, last Tuesday, I heard the drip. Not from a faucet, not from a pipe, from the concrete stairwell beneath my apartment. One drop. No puddle, just sound. I stood very still and waited. Nothing followed. That's the trick. It doesn't rush anymore, because it doesn't need to. I've learned the last rule now, the one nobody in Juniper Hollow ever said out loud, because saying it would mean admitting they were already part of it. The dry river doesn't hunt people. It teaches places how to listen. Once a place learns, it doesn't forget. Once a person learns, they become a reference point, a marker, a way the pattern checks itself. That's why it let me leave. Not mercy, not failure, distribution. I'm careful now. I don't walk unfamiliar paths at night. I don't step into construction zones. I don't follow lines unless I know who drew them and why. And when I hear tapping, because yes, I still do sometimes, I don't answer. I don't count. I don't even acknowledge the rhythm, because acknowledgement is a form of mapping. If you're listening to this and wondering whether any of it is real, I'll give you the only honest answer I have. It doesn't matter. Rivers don't need belief. They need direction. And if you ever find yourself in a small western town with a dry wash running through it, stones pale as bone, driftwood older than memory, do yourself a favor. Don't record the silence. Don't follow the lines. And whatever you do, if you hear water where there shouldn't be any, don't answer back.
I tried to prove I was imagining it. That was my mistake. 3 months after I recorded the last segment, I went back to the desert, not to Juniper Hollow, not to Bracken Ridge, but to a completely different stretch of the West. New state, new county, no dry wash marked on the map. I told myself this was closure. People like to give fear a shape they can confront. The town was called Mesa Verde Flats, small, quiet, ordinary in the way Western towns pretend to be. One diner, one gas pump, one school with a chain-link fence that rattled when the wind picked up. No river, no wash, no warnings. I checked into a motel just before sunset, concrete building, functional, forgettable. At 8 p.m., the same time as before, I heard the sound. Not tapping, not dripping, a pause. You don't notice pauses until you've learned what fills them. The air felt expectant, like a held breath stretched too long. I turned on the recorder, new one, bought recently, no history, no contamination. I said my name, I said the date, I said the town.
The recorder clicked once, then, quietly, without static, without distortion, it played something back immediately. Not a recording, a response. My voice, calm, neutral, slightly tired. "You're already mapped." I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor and cracked, still playing, still listening. The lights flickered once. Outside, I heard stones shift. Not many, just enough. I didn't go to the window. I didn't check the door. I sat on the bed and waited, because waiting is what you do when a place has already learned your outline. At 8:11 p.m., someone knocked. Not a frantic knock, not aggressive. 3 taps, pause. 2 taps, pause. 3 taps. I didn't answer. The knock repeated. Then a voice spoke through the door. A man's voice, my voice. "We don't use water anymore. We use memory." The doorknob didn't turn. The lock didn't test itself. It wasn't trying to enter. It was confirming location. I stayed silent. Minutes passed. Then the footsteps retreated. Outside, the wind returned. Normal sounds crept back in, like animals after a fire. I packed everything and left before dawn. I never checked out. I never went back. But I know now, without doubt, that the dry river was never confined to Juniper Hollow. It was a method, a way places learn how to remember people, a way people teach places how to listen. And once a place learns your name, you don't disappear. You become terrain.
I stopped traveling after Mesa Verde Flats. Not because I was afraid to move, because movement was no longer neutral. Once you understand how something works, pretending ignorance becomes participation. Roads aren't just distances anymore. They're connections. And connections are how systems learn. I stayed in one city, same apartment, same routes, same grocery store, same stairwell. I tried to be uninteresting. That was the goal. At first, it worked. Weeks passed without tapping, without drips, without bells hiding inside other sounds. Then the city started changing, not visibly, not dramatically, but relationally. Side streets I'd never taken began appearing in my dreams. Construction zones shifted overnight, cones rearranged into lines that pointed nowhere useful. Detours looped back on themselves, not trapping anyone, just observing. I realized something then that Juniper Hollow never figured out. The river doesn't draw maps. Maps draw rivers. What I crossed out west wasn't a place, it was a logic. A system that replaces flow with memory, water with response, erosion with attention. I'd thought avoiding answers would starve it. I was wrong. Silence isn't absence. Silence is data. At 1:27 a.m. last night, I heard the taps again. Not from below, not from the walls, from inside my chest. 3 slow heartbeats. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. I didn't panic. I didn't answer. I counted without counting. Let the rhythm pass through without sticking to it. That's when the final rule made itself clear. The river doesn't want everyone. It wants anchors. People who can stand still long enough for places to arrange themselves around. That's why I'm recording this now. Not as a warning, not as proof, as a boundary. If this recording ever reaches you, if you're hearing this without knowing how you found it, understand one thing clearly. You are not late. You are not chosen. You are simply standing somewhere a place hasn't finished learning yet. Don't help it. Don't trace lines you didn't draw. Don't listen for patterns when silence is doing its job. And if you ever hear water where there is none, walk away without marking the path. Because once a map starts using you, it never needs to follow again.